Hello there and welcome to my Arty Corner here on YouTube. My name's Angela Porter, and amongst other things, I guess I could be called an artist because that's what I sort of do for a living. I'm mostly known for my adult colouring books, but I have been known to do other things as well. It is Wednesday the 19th of October. I'm supposed to be working on a colouring book, but I got waylaid doing the template for the colouring book group on Facebook for tomorrow, and I got packages coming today and my head's all over the place, so it's never a good idea to focus on work when I'm like this. This I know from bitter experience. But I'd just like to thank you for joining me. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. If you have subscribed, you have my eternal gratitude. If you enjoy a video, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget about the bell notification button, so that you get notified when I upload a new video, which tends to be most days. Okay, I've had a couple of queries in the comments, so I'm going to start by answering those because it's easier if I show in some way. This background that you see here, and I'm going to make you all to see because I'm going to lift my camera up, caught sight of my lovely turquoisey coloured fleecy. This is my background. It is slightly bigger than A3 in size, so letter-sized paper-ish, A4 paper-ish, a bit bigger than two of those put together. And I drew on this. It's a drawing board, and I don't know if I pull it up, if you can see. Yeah, it's my non-slip mat underneath. But it's quite thick. It's about, I don't know, half a centimetre thick or so, perhaps a little bit more. And this is what it looked like before I did anything to it. It's compressed pieces of wood. It's they're joined together by glue or resin or something. I think it's either... It's not chipboard, I don't think. I think it's masonite, but I don't know. I bought this from Sea White of Brighton via Amazon. If you're interested, I'll put the link in. I don't know if they're available anywhere else because I'm in the UK. But it hasn't got a handle in it, which some of my older ones have, and they're thinner. I like a strong drawing board for a couple of things. One is that I can draw on it like this and create a pretty background, which was totally unexpected of me. And the other thing is that it's something I can take with me when I go out and about drawing. Because I do find drawing in sketchbooks can be really awkward for me. I much prefer pieces of paper. So having a drawing board means this will support the paper, and it's very smooth and very nice. To draw on here, I used one of my Tombow Fudenasuki pens to draw the black lines, and the colours have been added with alcohol markers, mostly the Arteza Everblend, and the white lines have been a Uniball Posca. That's it. And the colours are very muted because alcohol markers are transparent, so the underlying colour of the wood shows through, which tones them down, makes them very vintage looking. Excuse me. I then sealed this with a spray of satin varnish, spray varnish, and I think it was Plasticoat was the brand I bought, but there are many out there that you can use. And I enjoy drawing on this, not just because I quite like it, I think it's quite pretty, but because it's a very smooth surface, it's a very stable surface, it doesn't bend and wobble or anything. As I say, I can put it on my lap, I can use it anywhere. It's great. Okay, that first question. Now let me readjust my camera. It won't take me a moment because I'm mostly where I want to be with this. Yeah, just put it there. That'll do. The other question I had was about the things I use. I actually had two people ask something very similar. So I'm just going to autofocus this so it stays in focus. And I will move my mug out the way now of the window so we don't get that shadow, because I put it to one side so I didn't knock it over when I was showing you my drawing board. This is a piece of cut and dry foam. There are a couple of different brands, but I like the Ranger one. I think it's Essentials range, and it's cut dry, so there's an N there, not and. It's got two sides. One side is this kind of white foam, and it's very much like the foam that you have on the blending tools, which have circular discs that fit on the bottom of a wooden handle with Velcro. And the newer ones, they've got a domed surface. I've never got on well with those blending tools. I find them very awkward to use, and I never get a good finish, so I don't use that side. This side I do though. The other tool that somebody asked me about were these, which are blending brushes. These are actually makeup brushes because they're exactly the same thing as sold by craft companies, but they're not branded and they're a lot less expensive to buy that way. I did buy mine from Amazon. Very fine hair here, so they're not like shaving brushes, which I wouldn't buy because shaving brushes have got animal hair in them, and I'm vegetarian. So I avoid animal products of all sorts. But the difference between them, and I will show you, I have a piece of paper here, is the amount of ink you can put down with them. So I'm going to choose a colour that I'd like to use today. I'm in the mood for greens today. But which green? I want a green that's dark enough that you can see. Let's go for pine needles. No, evergreen bough, I think, today. Evergreen bough is kind of a nice bluey green, I suppose a piney green. So let me start with this. Now there's no way I can put the same amount of ink on these, each of these, as I would, you know, in a complete test. But I'm loading this up, right? And with these brushes, you do need to sort of like, it's almost like charge them, not charge them, what do you call it when you start something? Prime them with the ink. So the more you use them, the more ink they'll have. But you can see I've spent quite a while charging this with ink. I'm just doing that by rubbing the bristles on the top. It looks like there's a lot on there. The staining isn't important, by the way. There's such a little amount of ink left. But you can see that's all the ink that's coming off the bristles, and it's a very subtle, it's a very light kind of colour. And you only need a light hand. So these are brilliant if you want a very pale kind of colour, you know, just a light colouring. You can see how much there is around the edges. A lot gets left on the background paper. So if I was to start in the middle of this, chances are, no, I'm not getting anything darker there. So it's the nature of them. So if I just tap this on, and again, I'm doing this one's a mucky one, so I'm going to just clean it up a bit to get rid of whatever colour was on there. That's okay. Then I've just tapped it on a couple of times. But you can get a much stronger colour with this, depending on, there we go. You can see how mucky this piece of cut and dry foam is. But as I quite like grunginess, I'm fine with that. But you can see that I've been able to build up, hopefully you can see, I certainly can, a much more intense colour, more saturated colour here than I would have been able, you know, in the same amount of time I spent fussing around with the brush. So I just it depends what I want, and I quite like this piece of paper as it is, so I'm going to use that for today. So that's the only difference between them. In some ways it's very easy to get a very pale, sort of like not pale but a light coating of ink with the brush and build that up to the level you'd like. With the cut and dry foam, if the ink pad's nice and juicy, which this one doesn't seem, well, I think it is, then you can quickly build up a deeper intensity. And I've got a different colour for each set of colours, kind of colour families. But I'll use this with all the darker greens and yellowy greens. I've got one that's a bluey green, which I do keep for the paler ones, because the darker ones will pick up. So I hope that has helped explain this. Oh, the other thing, while I'm talking about this, let me just rustle around a moment. There we go. No, I don't think I want that one. I'm looking for a stencil. So I'm stencil hunting at the moment. That one will be quite nice, I think. Okay, let me just get that colour out again. The cut and dry foam will not work through stencils. And I do from time to time. It varies, it depends what mood I'm in. I do like to add some pattern through a stencil to my paper, my coloured paper. And the brush will do that. The cut and dry foam won't penetrate through the little gaps, but the brush will. And it can be as subtle or as dark as you want. I'm using the same colour green here, just a couple of passes. And you can see I've got a very subtle kind of pattern going on there. I am going to just pop this one here. Add a bit more over here. And even on this darker region, you'll get that shadowing of the pattern. So it's very subtle, it's very lovely. I don't do this often enough, you know. I'm looking at that. Obviously, if you use a different colour, a darker colour, you're going to get a more intense kind of effect. So let's go for something that's a bit darker here. Let's go for the pine needles. And I've just offset this on my, hopefully I've offset it on the pattern. I think I have. I'll offset it just a little bit. And I'll just put some down. Oops. And there you can see the slightly darker version. You can still see the paler one underneath. So stencils are a great way for adding background interest. They're also very controllable in their way. So you get control with the amount of colour you put down with each. It's just this one will put more ink down than this one each time you add it. And these are great for stencils, whereas this won't work with a stencil. I know that because I've tried. So I hope that has helped. Yeah, I hope so. Because, yeah, let me just move this out the way. So I'll use that piece of paper now. I've coloured it for today because that's what I do. Okie dokes. Now, I'm not going to have a video tomorrow because I really do need to focus on some work. You'll hear me rattling because I'm going in my pencil case for a pen. Hopefully I can find the size I want in here, otherwise. Oh, dear goodness. I get myself into such a pickle. Okay. Really don't want an 08. That is too thick, even for me. An 03 would be, I think an 03 might be okay. I'll just have a look in my other pencil case and see if I have. Do I? Nope, I don't. I've got an 05 in brown, but I really don't want the brown. So this is me being organised, not. Okay, so let's have a look at today's Tangle patterns. Oh, today's Tangle pattern for Inktober 2022. Inktober Tangles 2022, Inktober. I say today's the 19th, so I'll have a look at day 19 and day 20. And the first one, to day 19, is called Tagh, which is Tagh with an H on the end. And it's a kind of pattern that will grow in whatever way you would like it to grow. And it is open to various kinds of variations, embellishments and so on. So the basic version of Tagh is you start, I'm going to start in a corner. I'll start with a corner that's got some stencil design on, so you can see the stencil design. You won't even notice it really. And let me start with a pencil border as well. And I'm not too worried about this as to whether it's completely straight or not, because this will end up in my sketchbook. I'm going to have to do a flip through of some of my sketchbooks for you, aren't I, at some point? Let me know in the comments if you'd like a flip through of my sketchbooks. And I'll do that. Not all of them, because I've got a ridiculously large number. But if you'd like to see some of my latest sketchbook pages anyway. Okay, so with Tagh, you start with a seed of some kind. I'm going to start with the classic one, which is a little circle. And then you draw around it like this. And that is the basic part of it. But then we need to grow this. So the way we grow this is I'm going to pop a couple of other seeds here. Doesn't matter where you put them. And we're going to create this shape around them. And I'm going to pop one here, and I'm going to grow that shape as if it's behind these, like so. And I think it's, for me, the obvious place for me to put these little seeds is where there's a natural space for them to sit in. Like so. And you just keep going until you get something that is the size or shape you would like. I mean, what can I say? The hard part is if you want something that will, I suppose, fill a specific area or be a specific shape. And that just takes a bit of forethought, I suppose, or just stopping and thinking about the space you want to fill with this. So here I've created something that's very rambling and very, very organic in growth, because that would be my particular kind of instinct. What I'm doing here, though, is I'm alternating them to create a simple kind of ribbon. And I'm not worried if the size changes too much. But I'm getting to that point where I think that is more or less done. I'm going to pop one in here, though. Another one here. And perhaps one here just to... it's one of these things where you add something and you think, no, I've got to do another one. Then I've got to do another one. And then there we are. Got a small one there. Perhaps I'll add a small one there. Perhaps another small one here. And there. So we can add partial ones as well. So it grows in this very organic kind of way. Now I used a circle there to start this off. But you don't have to. You could use any shape you like. In fact, I find it really awkward to start with those seeds and grow outwards. I prefer to start with the shape and then add in whatever I'm going to put at the bottom. So here I've got something that looks a little bit like a diamond. So, and I'm going to grow these in some kind of fashion. That's a very strange one. But I'm going to add my seed there. I can put the seed in the middle there if I want. So wherever you think it should be. And you just keep going. Sometimes I can see where I want one to go and I can fill that little shape in at first. Sorry, excuse me. So it gives it a different feel. This one has got the feeling of being much more lighter and airy, whereas the other one has the feeling of, you know, being solid. This one, I don't know, I'd want to put it underwater with fish and things swimming around it. This one, yeah, it feels a bit more spiky. It feels a bit like pussy willows. Pussy willows, they are the sort of like, they're not really a flower, but they're the pollen bearing part of I think it's the female hazel tree in the spring, and they've got a lovely silvery kind of furry tops to them, which look a little bit like cat paws, I suppose, which is why they're called pussy willow. And they're furry because they capture the pollen in the wind, because they appear early on in the spring before insects are very busy, and so they rely on wind for the pollen to be transferred from the male flower, or the male flower to the female flower of the plants. And so you need something to catch the pollen, which is what the fur is all about. There you are. Science lesson for the day as well. Okay, so we've got these here. And I'm going to add something. Let's have a look if we can do something a bit different. So here, instead of having these little spiky bits, we can have long, thin ones like this. More leaf shapes there. And of course they can grow however you want them. I'll stick them in between things like this and overlay them, but sometimes it's easier just to look for where the little spaces are, you know, these little dips, or where they meet, and you've got these places here where you can put these shapes in and build them in this kind of fashion. So there's another kind of pattern or shape that goes here as well. There we go. I'll add a couple around here. Perhaps one that goes this way. And then where you've got gaps between them, you can leave them empty, or my usual way is just to fill those in, because it helps to bring out the structure and pattern. What other shapes can you have? Well, if you can have leaves, you can have hearts. Because why not? I could have a little heart there. Again, I've got a gap there where there is a gap, so I'm just filling it in with black. And the hearts, I'm making the loop around them almost circular. Ooh. And of course you don't have to have them almost circular or wide like these ones here. We can make them long and thin. So here I'm putting a long thin shape in. I'm filling the bottom of that shape with a little bit of black ink, because black is what I'm using. And that little bit of, weight there just makes it a bit different to this one down here. This is the original one down here. Just checking that I'm on camera still, because I couldn't see my screen for a moment. Oh, there we go. We're going to have another one of those there. So we're getting all kinds of things growing together here. And of course you can go with something that's as simple as a line and pop this around. So then they end up looking a bit like leaves. which is fine. There's not a problem with that. But I tend to want to put little circles on the end because that's what I do. So I'll pop one here and perhaps have some that go behind here as well, just to finish this off and get these two areas to join, because they will join. It doesn't matter which way you go. It's a very strange looking garden going on here, I have to say. These aren't the only things that we can do. So here I'm going to start with this, and we could curl over one side like that, just adding one of those little leaf furls in. And with this I'm going to put a black dot at the top of these ones so that they do look a little bit different from these others. It's just little simple changes like this, just makes them look a little bit different. So this one I'm going to put a line across. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to double. This with an aura around it. They do look a bit ridiculous with just one stripe, so let's make them stripy. And that's how I actually like to do them. I'll show you. So I'm drawing the inner bit. I'm going to add my stripes. And then I'm going to draw along that, come out with the shape, and then to aura it, I'm going to also cycle, sort of like go over that line and then come out and around. It changes the shape slightly to more of a teardrop shape. Oh, I was going to do one without this. Okay. So that works quite nicely. I'll do one without that so you can see the shape. So I'm going from the base around, out, and back down. You can see that teardrop shape. And then to create the aura, whether it's inside or out, doesn't matter which way around you do it. You just make sure you have the lines joining together at the point. So we've got some others going on here. If we can do shapes like this, then we can also do shapes like this. And that is very vining. I'll add, I think I'll add one of these stripy ones coming out here. So that was looking a bit awkward here. I don't like things that look too awkward. There we go. That looks a bit better. Let's probably need another one here now. But this is all part and parcel of the process. It's looking back or looking at what you're doing and deciding, yeah, that doesn't look quite right there, but if I pop something in there, it most probably will look fine. So in some of these places I'm putting in just some of these little shapes without the outer bit. It just adds a little bit of something in between them where, just like that. It's really nice, isn't it? I've never really used this. I use patterns like this all the time in what I do. I've never come across this tag with Zentangle before. I really haven't. And so looking at the pattern and everything, I'm thinking, yeah, okay, I do that. So it's always interesting to me how things like this can grow and can develop. And I'll come back to it in a moment, because I'll have a look at them for day 20, which is tomorrow. But this is just such a lovely kind of pattern. Let me have a look. With these, I think I'd want to put something like this here. So I'm putting like a little bead or a little berry in the top there. But you could put something else, perhaps a shape like that. Or perhaps this is where you launch the next one from, which is quite fun and quite interesting actually. So you can have branches of these, and you can kind of, with a bit of finagling, by bending that shape, you can get them to go in the direction you'd like them to go. So there are lots of options here as to what you can do. If you think about all the shapes there are that you could produce like this. So if I go to this one, I'm going, what was the shape I was going to do? Come on, Angela. Oh yeah. So I'm going to add one like this, and then I'm going to add something that's very ginkgo leaf-like, simply because I can. So here I can do my little blob. This one's a bit more challenging because you'd have to go behind various ones, but that's the same with all of them really. And then I'll do my little thing like this. What I'm trying to do here as well is I can see there's a gap here, but if I fill this in with black, it's going to confuse things. Whereas if I can kind of put this space, this aura around them, then it's not going to be quite as awkward. So you can, don't know if you can see here, this little space here, if I fill that with black, it doesn't run into that area. But this is quite an interesting one in terms of how we create them. They actually work well together. I actually really like that. That would be a lot of fun to work with. I do want just another something here, just to connect this in a nice kind of way, as it were. So my edges are getting very messy, but they're supposed to, which is fine by me. Okay, other shapes. Well, there's no reason why you can't use more leafy-like shapes. I think the lovely thing about Zentangle per se is that all of the patterns that you have are just places to start from. The encouragement that I can give you is just to try things out, to see what happens. You might not like what happens, but you'll learn from that process. It doesn't mean that you're not good at being creative. It shows that you are being creative and you're prepared to take a risk and see what happens. But you may surprise yourself and discover that you quite like what you draw. And my best advice for you about this is to build up almost like a reference of shapes you could use, or you know, yeah, shapes really. Because those variations in shapes, something you can look on, you go, I wonder what would happen if I did this. And you can see what I'm doing here. I'm using kind of leaf shapes instead of the rounded shapes. And it's the same way of constructing a pattern all the way along. I'm using some kind of shape as a seed. So I'm trying to think what could I use here. I'll use a line with a dot, and then I'm going to add a different shape on the top of it. And sometimes that shape looks a bit odd, but if I add some weight there, it now looks like a fish head, which is fine. It is what it is. Perhaps I can try a smaller dot there, and like this, and so on. It may not be, oh, that's better. I haven't gone quite so sharply down. It looks more like a tulip almost. And here I've got it spreading out. That's a fishtail. Is to look at things that you're familiar with, or, you know, in pictures, in books, photographs, in the world around you, and you'll spot shapes. You know, I said this looks like a fishtail, but I can guarantee you there was no idea that I was going to draw a fishtail in my head at all. You might have been able to tell that, oh, it looks like a fishtail. It's like the bunny ear, sort of leaves version of Mooka I did the other day. I had no idea it was going to end up looking like weird alien bunny ears, but it did. So I've got a different shape there. You know, we could even go, if you wanted to, I'm going to put a kind of square shape there, and we could even use squares in this, or oblongs, rectangles, whatever you want to call these, instead of more rounded shapes, and it works. And it doesn't matter. It's if that is the pattern you like, if that is the pattern you've created, it's not wrong. And it's not wrong if somebody else says, oh, I don't like that. That's not important. It's the fact that you like it, or you've created something. And it may be something nobody else has done before. The chances are, though, people have, because, you know, patterns are used throughout time, and inspiration is drawn from things from the past as well. I love medieval manuscripts. I love the arts and crafts movement. And I can see in my work now how I've somehow been influenced by these. Well, I know I've been influenced by the love of medieval and Romanesque architecture and so on, and the patterns that I see there. But I didn't realise how much the art and crafts movement had had an influence on me as well, in the way that I draw flowers and so on. And yet it's not something I've ever really studied. Though I've mentioned this castle before. There's a castle just down the road from me called Castell. And it's a Victorian folly almost, built by the Marquis of Bute. And the architect was William Burgess, who was one of the arts and crafts movement, was one of people who worked with William Morris. And I used to spend Sunday afternoons there for extended, you know, quite often as a child. And in the days when you could just go in and you could explore and wander around, and there are parts now you can't go into, which I could as a child. And it was a place of wonder with all these amazing decorations and pictures and so on the wall, you know, painted on the walls, and the colours. And I could lose myself in looking at these things. And that the love of that has stuck with me without me realising it until, literally about 2 weeks ago. Because I can be dense. I can be really dense about things. But it's been a pleasant surprise. So if we can do squares, how about triangles in this kind of way? And the answer is, but of course. And we could even do really random shapes as well, which I'm going to come to in a moment, because I will find somewhere to shove some random shapes in as well. So I can pop that there, and so on. So I've got a right go around of all different kinds of things. So I said about random shapes. Well, I'm just going to start here with, I'm splitting that little teardrop shape with a vertical line, and then random shapes. There's one random shape. And there's another one. I think it's more like I'm sticking to. There's another one. If you're familiar with Zentangle, I think they brought out something they call Pangea as a new reticulum or new shape. It's kind of like that, but we're stacking them instead of leaving spaces between them. So that works as well. And mine are all different, but you could make them all very much the same. And this big space here, I'm just going to fill in with black, because it'll tidy up my lines. So there we have Tagh. Here I'm just going to add some muka, perhaps, just to give me the feeling that this is kind of meant to perhaps be here, as it were, to the corner a little bit. I do think I could have one here. So I'm starting to add things to it, just to, you know, I've got these gaps. It's my need to have things perfectly straight and everything. I'm a mare for it. But right, okay. So that's a bit better there. So there's some options for you with Tagh. Right, that's day 19. So, and I'll write that down. Shall I label it? Yes, it's going in my sketchbook. And this is by Zentangle themselves, so Tagh. Okay. The next, day 20, this is tomorrow's, is called Walk the Line, and it's by Chris Titus. And I think this will work here. Now, what would normally happen, what she's got in her step out, and I will put links to the step outs in the description box below, is starting with a straight line. Well, I'm going to start with in here, and I'm going to have mine actually going all the way around. And what she does is we're going to have a wavy line that will. I'm going to go all the way around here. Oh, this is beginning to look very microscopic, cellular-like. Tell you what, if your cells look like this under the microscope, there will be something very strange growing within you. You can see it's sort of like it's a very random kind of line, and it's best not to think about it. We want it random. And I've created some of these that are tall, some are shorter, and I may not have done a very good job of this, but we shall see. So the next step in this pattern is actually to draw in lines. I'm going with the ones that are sticking upwards. So I've got this one here, and I'm going to draw that in that kind of way. And here. Got a big gap here on this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to split this here. And that'll work out fine. You won't even notice it. And I think it's going to end up being the same here as we go around corners. So I'm going to split this a little bit. And I'm just going to keep on doing this. I'm going to go around. I've got a gap here that I am going to fill in with black because I really don't want to take these lines down through all of this border. So if I get one like, you know, I've got one that would go here, that's okay, but I'm going to fill the other side with black. I'm averse to trying to get lines to go right the way through objects in their own way. Ooh, this one's a very narrow line. Makes up for all the wider ones. So I am literally taking these ones that stick towards the centre. I'm just drawing along the edge and extending the lines somewhat. I'm trying to have them as if they're radiating out from the centre in some way. Sometimes they'll go off in funny directions, and that's fine. It's not meant to be perfect. If it was meant to be perfect, we wouldn't have drawn a wibbly wobbly line like this. But this is something that I do, but I've used this pattern without knowing there was a Zentangle step out for it. So it reminds me very much of broken edges of rock, worn away, weathered rock. And again, you know, as a child, I used to spend an awful lot of time on the Glamorgan Heritage Coast here in Wales. And it's mostly sedimentary rocks, or all sedimentary rocks, rather. And the beds of rock, which is the, you know, the layers, get worn away on the edge of the cliffs and actually on the seashore as well, in this kind of pattern, is you've got weaker rocks, or rocks that are more easily eroded, next to rocks that are, you know, less easily eroded, shall we say. I can't think of the right term for it. That's a big one there. We'll solve that in a moment, hopefully. Now I've put that one down there, and what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to fill that with black, because it saves me having to go through all of these here. Okay, so I'm starting to get this really lovely pattern, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back. With this one I definitely am going to add some other lines here, and I think I'll just split them as they need to be split and stack them. And I'm just adding some weight, particularly where these all end. So I'm going around the top, and just the ones in between sort of like tend to bend downwards, but we just want, it isn't quite as it is in the step out. This is Angela's version. Oh gosh, that's better. As I go to the left hand side of these, I'm adding weight on the left hand side of the taller sections. Just adds dimension instantly. As soon as you add line weight, you automatically get a sense of shadow. And that's what I'm going to do here. I could have done this as I was working my way round, but I chose not to. I'm going to add another line in there. It's going to thicken that one as well. It's where there are these bigger sections, then I'm just going to fit in lines there. It's a very strange shape there, so I'll just adjust that a little. There we go, and there we can have a thicker line and a thinner line. There. Just can put a line in there as well. So ultimately it's not that important where you have thick lines and thin lines, it's just I like to alternate them because it makes some kind of sense. And I'm not working with a light source, this is just part of the pattern and adding interest and variety to this. That's one of the ones that needs to be thicker, as is that one. There. So that adds a lot of interest. And I'm going to do another one inside this. Like so. And exactly the same thing. So I'll do this much more quickly because I now know what I'm going to do with it. That one there. So on the left hand side I'm going to thicken it. Left hand side, thick, thin, thick, thin, thick. This is where I wish I'd dug out my Fudenasuki pen, because to make lines thicker it's a lot easier, but hey ho, it is what it is, and you work with it. Now this one here I am going to do a bit of creative license here and just add lines into that section just to break it down. And it all works out just fabulously. The hard thing is to keep the focus on which side you need to make thick and which side you need to make thin. But as I've said at the end of it, it will all work out anyway. And I'm back to the beginning. I'll need some ones in here though, like so. So it is very much like jagged rocks of some kind or another. And this is called walking the line. So, and walk the line. And I'm not going to pop that in there, but I will put it here. So tag H is day 19 and walk the line is day 20. So that's all good fun. Now, shading, I'm going to see what time I've got. Oh gosh, nearly an hour. I'll add some colour and so on with, I'll do some shading with some Inktense. I'm looking for my iron green. There we go. So I'll want these bits here that are in shadow to be darker. So I am kind of alternating them. having a look because here I've got two close together. So I'm just going to do some of these. I'm not going to do them all. It's sketchbook. Besides that, if I do them all, I won't have anything left to play with while everything's uploading and whatnot. So just by adding that little bit of colour here to these darker areas, I'm trying to keep the outer, you know, the edge that's closest to the centre lighter in colour, so that it feels that we've really got quite a lot of shadow at the base of these. So I'm going to add the shadows in to these. That one, I'm just going to put some there. And we'll have a look at what they look like close to each other as well then. Now I could add colour to the ones that I think are above. This one, I've added some shadow along the edge here, just to suggest it's not quite as dark as this one, so it could be a bit higher up, but not quite as high up. Yep, I'm using my pen to clean the brush off, my hand to clean my brush off on again. Yeah, I know. But that starts to add that feeling of dimension and whatnot into them. For these, I'm going to take the approach, and it'll be the same for all of these, I think, of adding shadow close to the base and just adding that little bit of, perhaps a little bit darker around the edge, and just keep the inner area fairly light. So with this one, I'm going to add some more colour around the edge. Stop. Like so. And then I can just fill the rest in with a bit more colour. So that will add that feeling of shadow, particularly behind these bits, because then they will appear as if they are standing up from this particular leaf shape. Just trying to work out which way I like to shade them. This is why sketchbook work, or working like this, is so important, because you have a chance to try different things out. So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to add darkness at the top and at the bottom, perhaps a little bit around the side, and let's see if intensifying this, the darker areas, will increase that shape. Okay, come on, we don't want all of that colour in the middle. That's better. But of course we can also do just shadow in the middle, and I could extend that shadow so it goes, don't know if you can see, so I've got shadow around this, but I've got this darker area in the centre, as if this leaf is folded or dipping down, so the edges then will be lighter than the centre. Just picking up some of that colour while it's still wet with a clean brush. So I don't know whether that's worked. It can be hard for me to see my illusions. With these, I think I'd be tempted to make these quite dark. like so. It's one way of doing it. You could also put the colour on one side of these and then have half kind of light and one side fairly light and the other side quite dark, which will add to the volume. I need to let those dry before I do anything else. How are these doing? These are quite dry. With these outside bits, I think I'd again go dark where they tuck in and just bring the colour out. And I have to say, I really, really love working in monochrome. There is something about it that just pleases me hugely. And then I could do the same with this. Going back to these, where I add colour on one side, perhaps to the other side of the essential bits. So I don't know if you, hopefully you can see what I'm doing. So I'm putting shadow around the outside edge of the leaf, and then these little bits inside, I'm putting the shadow on the opposite side. And we'll see how that works out. So we'll have a lot of colour there, not so much there, not much here, but a hefty whack along that edge. And that will add a different kind of volume to it. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to activate all that Inktense pencil. Just move that. Got lots here of colour. Don't want too much to go over here because I do want to keep it fairly light. Same as this one here. I want to keep the darkness there. I want the rest of it to be fairly light. But I've got some darker shade here just to bring that in. This creates dimension in a very different kind of way. It looks like the middle central bits are set inwards and that we've got this very plump leaf around it. So I'm glad I experimented. I am. Like so. And that kind of way of adding shadow would apply to all of them. You know, you can apply this to anyone. Yeah. Okay. Are there any others I want to tackle particularly? I don't think so. I can't think of. So with this one, stop running away. Just activating all of this here. So, that. I'm quite chuffed with this, to be honest. I really am. That walk the line appeals to me hugely. And I think with different colours and so on, it will really bring that out nicely. Of course, we have the opportunity to add some white. So I have got here the white glaze pen, and I am just going to add little dots of white in places. So on this one, I'm looking at where these would be lightest, just to help to bring that feeling of dimension out. It'll take a moment for them to dry for you to see. This one, I'm going to bring just a couple down, further down. with these ones, with Walk the Line, I'm moving this round so my hands aren't in the way. I'm going to perhaps put a couple just at the ends of the lighter regions. I'm being careful not to do exactly the same with each one, because I like the randomness that that brings and that kind of feeling of nature, natural things, the randomness there. And here in this little space, I am going to put my initials very quickly. So this is my response to days 19 and 20. As I said, on the 20th of October, that's Thursday, that's tomorrow as far as I'm doing this. There won't be a video because I'll be doing other things, like working, because I need to do that. Need to get my head down on it. But I do hope you have a go with these because they are lovely patterns, and that you can see the white beginning to dry and show now, and just lighten those areas up and give that bit of brightness and shine. The other thing is that once I've put these white glaze in, once they dry, I can always add more colour and it will just won't stick to it. Won't. Just doesn't. And that's one of the lovely things about glazed pens, is that they create that waterproof barrier, if you like, to things. So I could have put the highlights on first and then added colour over the top, which is always fun because you just never quite know what's going to happen or how it's going to work out. This one's interesting because it looks a bit like a succulent or a cactus now. So I've created a cactus, a tag cactus, a cactus tag, I don't know. So I hope you found this useful. I hope I've explained well how I find the difference between the cut and dry foam and the makeup brushes, and that I've explained these well and given you some ideas of things to try. And if you'd like to see any of my sketchbook pages, because when I put these into my sketchbook they get stuck in, but then I can't help but draw around them. Sometimes with the patterns I've used, sometimes just with random stuff. Yesterday's ended up with quite an arts and crafts surrounding to it, because that's what I do these days. So anyway, take care, look after yourselves, and find time to be creative, and thank you for joining me. Ta-ta for now. Bye. Bye.